Amara's feet hit the pavement hard, her breath tearing out of her in ragged bursts as she sprinted through the narrow streets of Mapugu. The hospital was 6 blocks away. She had 4 minutes. Her supervisor had already sent 2 messages. The third one would be the last. She cut through an alley, her rubber-soled shoes sliding against the frost-slicked concrete, caught herself on a wall and kept running. She couldn't lose this job. Not now. Not after everything she had sacrificed to be here. Then she heard it. A sound so small it should have disappeared into the noise of the city. A child crying. Not the loud, demanding kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes from a child who has already given up on being heard. She almost kept running. Her feet slowed without her permission. She turned her head and saw him. A small boy, no older than 5, sitting on the curb outside a convenience store. His coat was expensive. His shoes were immaculate. His face was buried in his hands and his tiny shoulders shook with each silent sob. Amara Johnson stood in the middle of the sidewalk, her chest heaving, her phone buzzing in her pocket, and every rational instinct in her body screaming at her to go. She didn't go. She had no idea that single decision would unravel everything she thought she knew about her life in this city. Amara had come to South Korea 3 years ago with 2 suitcases, a nursing license, and the kind of optimism that only survives before real life begins. She had taken the job at Hanyang Medical Center because the salary was competitive, and because her mother's medical bills back in Lagos were not going to pay themselves. She wired money home every month. She paid off a quarter of her student loans. She rented a small apartment in a building where the heating worked most of the time. She worked harder than anyone else in her ward, and she knew it. Her Korean colleagues were not unkind, most of them. But head nurse Shin was something else entirely. The woman had made it her personal mission to document every tardiness, every imperfection, every moment that Amara fell short of a standard that seemed to shift whenever Amara got close to meeting it. That morning, Amara had worked the night shift through to 3 in the morning, slept 4 hours, and overslept her alarm by 42 minutes. She had dressed in the dark, skipped eating, and was already mentally drafting her apology to Nurse Shin when the sound of the crying child stopped her cold. She walked to him slowly, the way you approach a frightened animal. "Hey," she said softly, crouching down to his level. "Hey, little one, are you okay?" He looked up. His eyes were red and wet, his cheeks flushed from the cold. He stared at her for a long moment, assessing her the way small children do, with a directness adults spend their whole lives trying to unlearn. "I cannot find my father," he said in Korean. Amara's Korean was functional, not perfect, but she understood that. She looked around. The street was busy, but no one was watching the child. No frantic parent, no searching adult. Just strangers walking past a small, expensive-looking boy sitting alone on a cold curb. "How long have you been sitting here?" she asked. He shrugged one small shoulder. "A long time." She checked her phone, 3 messages from Nurse Shin. She put the phone back in her pocket. "What's your name?" she asked. "Seo-jin," he said. "Seo-jin." She repeated it back to him with care, the way she said names at work when she wanted a patient to feel seen. "I'm Amara. Can I sit with you for a minute while we figure this out?" He looked at her for another long moment, then he nodded. She went into the convenience store and came back with warm barley milk and a small package of bread. She handed them to him and sat on the curb beside him, completely indifferent to what it was doing to her uniform. Seo-jin took the milk with both hands the way children do. He drank carefully. Some color came back into his face. "Is your father's phone number saved in your memory?" she asked. He shook his head. "Father doesn't give me his number. He says I am too small." "Do you know the name of where you live? The building, the neighborhood?" He thought about it, his small forehead creasing. "It's very tall," he said, "and there are many guards." Amara looked up and down the street again. Still nothing. But something was off about this child. The coat alone was worth more than her weekly grocery budget. His shoes were a brand she had only ever seen in department store windows. Whoever his father was, this was not a child who should be sitting alone on a public curb. "My father is always working," Seojin said quietly, tearing a piece of bread. "He never has time." Amara was quiet for a moment. She recognized that particular loneliness. She had heard it in 100 different forms, in 100 different patients who stared at hospital ceilings waiting for someone to come. "Sometimes grown-ups get so busy carrying the weight of everything that they forget to stop," she said. "But that doesn't mean they don't love you. It usually means the opposite." Seojin looked at her. "Do you really think so?" "I really think so." He considered this with the gravity that only a 5-year-old can bring to a philosophical question, then took another piece of bread. Neither of them noticed the black SUV that had slowed at the end of the street, or the man inside it who had been watching for the last 90 seconds. They came all at once. 3 vehicles, black, moving fast. They pulled into the block with the kind of controlled aggression that made pedestrians stop and stare. Men stepped out before the cars fully stopped, dressed in dark suits, moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who were paid to anticipate problems and eliminate them quickly. Amara was on her feet before she understood why. Her body made the decision before her brain caught up. She stepped in front of Seojin, arms slightly out, placing herself between the child and the men coming toward them. "Who are you?" she demanded in Korean, her voice sharp and clear. "What do you want?" The men stopped. One of them actually blinked. In all their years working this particular job, no one had ever done that. No one had ever stepped into their path and demanded identification. Most people backed away. Most people looked at the ground. The lead bodyguard opened his mouth. Then Seojin burst past Amara's outstretched arm and launched himself at the nearest man like a small missile. "Uncle D-ho." The man in the suit caught the boy automatically, his stone-faced professionalism cracking just slightly as Seojin locked both arms around his neck. The tension in the street shifted like weather. But Amara didn't move. She was still standing exactly where she had positioned herself, watching the men, watching the cars, watching for what she didn't yet understand. In the last SUV, the rear window lowered 2 inches. Dark eyes watched the scene. The nurse who had stood her ground. The nurse who had not asked who the men were before she decided to protect the child. The nurse who was still standing there, jaw set, trying to understand what was happening. Kang Jun-hyuk had been in many rooms with many dangerous people. He had seen men beg, lie, perform, manipulate. He had seen people do extraordinary things for money and terrible things for fear. He had never seen a stranger step in front of his son for no reason at all, except that a child needed protecting. He watched her for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. "Find out who she is," he said, "everything." Amara arrived at the hospital 47 minutes late. Nurse Shin was waiting at the entrance to the ward with the particular stillness of a person who has been rehearsing their disappointment. The dressing down was public and precise. Every tardiness logged, every previous warning cited, every other nurse in earshot made aware that standards existed and that some people seemed to find them optional. Amara kept her face neutral. She had learned over 3 years that any visible reaction only extended the performance. She changed into scrubs, clocked in and went to work. For 4 hours, nothing happened. She administered medications, checked charts, sat with a post-surgical patient who was frightened and needed someone to explain the same thing 3 different ways until it made sense. She was good at her job. She had always been good at her job. Then the call came from administration. A discrepancy in the medication records. Ward B, a patient had received the wrong dosage. Someone had signed off on it. Amara looked at the chart they showed her. Her name was on it. "I didn't administer this," she said. Her voice was steady because her mind was still processing what her eyes were seeing. "I was in Ward A at this time. Check the camera logs." The administrator looked at her with the particular expression of someone who has already decided the conclusion and is only now reviewing the evidence. "The records indicate." "The records are wrong," Amara said, "or they were changed. I was not in Ward B at 1400 hours. I have never falsified a record in my career. Check the cameras." But administration moved fast, faster than felt proportionate to a single incident, faster than felt coincidental. By 5 o'clock, Amara was suspended pending investigation. She handed over her ID badge with hands that did not shake only because she refused to let them. She walked through the lobby without looking at anyone. She pushed through the front doors into the cold evening air and stood on the pavement outside the hospital where she had worked for 3 years. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she started walking home. 3 days passed. She spent the first day making calls to employment lawyers whose consultation fees she couldn't afford. She spent the second day rereading her contract and drafting a formal complaint she wasn't sure would go anywhere. She spent the third day sitting by her window watching the street below and trying to map a path back to her life that didn't require starting completely from scratch. On the morning of the fourth day, her phone rang. The number was private. "Miss Johnson." The voice was male, Korean, and spoke English with careful precision. "My employer would like to meet with you. A car will arrive at your address in 30 minutes. She should have said no. Every sensible instinct she owned told her to say no. She thought about Seo-jin's face when he said his father was always working. She thought about warm milk on a cold curb and a small hand tearing bread. "All right," she said. The hospital lobby was the fullest it ever got on a Thursday morning. Families waiting, patients being discharged, administrative staff moving between desks. The particular low-level chaos of a large medical institution running at capacity. The convoy arrived without announcement. People in the lobby heard the vehicles before they saw them. 3 black SUVs pulling into the drop-off area with the kind of presence that made security personnel exchange glances. Men in suits entered through the front doors and the lobby did something unusual. It went quiet. Not completely, but the register dropped. The movement slowed. People who hadn't looked up from their phones looked up from their phones. Kang Jun-hyuk walked through the front doors of Hanyang Medical Center like he had been inside every building he had ever entered. Not like he owned it. More precisely than that. Like ownership was a concept too small to apply to him. The hospital director appeared from a corridor at a speed that suggested he had been notified and had run. But then Seo-jin, who had come inside holding his bodyguard's hand, suddenly twisted free. He had spotted her from across the lobby. Amara was standing near the administrative counter, having arrived ahead of the car that had collected her at Jun-hyuk's arrangement, trying to understand why she had been brought back here. She turned at the sound of her name and found 70 pounds of 5-year-old boy colliding with her at speed. "That's her," Seo-jin shouted, in the way of children who have not yet learned that volume and occasion are related. "That's the nurse, the nice lady from outside the shop." Every person in the lobby turned. Amara held the boy automatically, her hands going to his back, her face confused and open and completely unprepared for what came next. Kang Jun-hyuk crossed the lobby slowly. The crowd parted without anyone consciously deciding to part. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. She had not known who he was when she stepped in front of his son. She had looked him up since then, after the car ride, after the phone call, after she'd had 30 minutes and a search engine, and the kind of cold clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose. She knew who he was now. And she stood her ground anyway. He looked at her for a moment. Something passed across his face that his staff had never seen there before. He lowered his head, not fully. Not a bow. Something more controlled, more deliberate, the kind of acknowledgement a man makes when he has decided that the gesture costs him nothing and means everything. "You protected my son," he said quietly, "when the men I paid to do exactly that failed." The lobby was absolutely silent. Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at Seojin, who was beaming up at her with the uncomplicated joy of a child who has solved a problem by simply running toward it. "He was cold and frightened," she said. "Anyone would have done the same." "They didn't," Junhyuk said. Before she could respond, he turned to the hospital director. What followed was not a conversation. It was a recalibration of power conducted in the language of very quiet, very specific questions and very uncomfortable answers. Junhyuk asked about the suspension. The director stammered through an explanation of the medication discrepancy. Junhyuk asked which records had been reviewed. The director mentioned the chart. Junhyuk asked whether the camera footage had been checked. There was a pause. A long one. "Get someone to check it now," Junhyuk said. It took less than an hour. The camera footage showed Amara in Ward A at the time the medication was administered in Ward B. A review of the digital records showed that the timestamp on the falsified chart had been altered. A second review identified the staff member who had accessed the system and made the change. The other nurse had been in a disciplinary process of her own. She had needed a deflection. Amara was officially cleared before noon. She stood in the director's office and received her reinstatement with the flat, quiet dignity of a person who had been right all along and found no satisfaction in being proven so. The director apologized at length. She accepted the apology with 3 words and left his office. Junhyuk was waiting in the corridor. Seojin was sitting in a chair nearby, eating a rice cracker that one of the bodyguards had produced from somewhere, completely content with the outcome of the morning's events. Junhyuk looked at her as she came out of the director's office. She looked back at him. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it plainly. Not gratefully, exactly. More the way one professional acknowledges another who has handled something cleanly. "I have a proposition," he said. She waited. "My son has not stopped talking about you for 4 days," he said. "He asks about you at breakfast. He asked his bodyguard to describe your hairstyle. He asked whether nurses could come to dinner." He paused. "He doesn't trust easily. He doesn't attach easily. His mother died 2 years ago." Amara was quiet. "I need someone to look after him," Junhyuk said. "Not just medically. He needs someone consistent, someone who won't leave when it becomes complicated." "What does complicated mean in your household?" she asked. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't quite a smile. It was the shape of a smile, acknowledged and then put away. "It means what you already know it means," he said. "You looked me up." "I did. And you're still standing here." "I'm still standing here," she agreed. He named a figure. It was monthly. It was more than she made in a quarter at the hospital. She didn't react to the number. She looked at Seojin, who had finished his rice cracker and was now watching her with both hands folded in his lap, and a patience that was clearly learned from prolonged exposure to waiting for adults to make decisions. He didn't say please with his mouth. He said it with everything else. Amara closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them. "I'll need Sundays," she said, "and I won't lie to him about anything." Junhyuk considered this, agreed. "And if I ever believe he's in danger, I will act to protect him regardless of whatever else is happening in your world." Something changed in Junhyuk's expression, not softening exactly, more like recognition, the way a person looks at something they were not expecting to find. "That is," he said carefully, "exactly why I'm asking you." Before we go further into this story, I want to take a moment to step outside the world of Amara and Seojin, because this channel only exists because of you. You are the reason these stories get told. And I want to take a moment to speak directly to the people who have been here with us, who keep coming back, who share these stories with people they love. If you are new here, welcome home. You have found the Velvet Empire family. For those of you who are 40, 50, 60 and beyond, this prayer is especially for you, because you carry a weight that the world doesn't always see, and you deserve to be covered. May your body stay strong and your health remain steady. May you wake every morning with clear eyes and sound lungs and legs that carry you where you need to go. May sudden illness find no place in your home, and may tragedy pass over your threshold without entering. May your home be a place of genuine peace, not the silence of avoidance, but the deep quiet of people who are safe with each other. May stability return to any area of your life where uncertainty has been living too long. May your children and grandchildren be protected. May their paths be cleared of unnecessary hardship. May they find favor in rooms before they even know they need it, and may success follow their effort. May your finances hold. May the money you have worked for stretch further than it should. May unexpected provision find you in seasons of shortage. May your wisdom increase in every decision that counts. May you recognize the right door before it closes. May emotional healing come quietly to the places inside you that have been carrying grief or disappointment in silence for longer than anyone knows. And may you live long, not just in years but in joy. May your later years hold something worth looking forward to, and may your purpose find full expression before you're done. If this blessing landed somewhere real in you today, please type Amen in the comments. Like this video so others can find it. And subscribe to this channel, because your subscription is genuinely the only way we can keep this community alive and these stories coming. We are the Velvet Empire family, and you matter here. Now back to Amara. The house was not what she expected. She had imagined something cold, all clean lines and silence, and the kind of expensive emptiness that communicates power by communicating nothing. She had prepared herself, during the car ride to the compound on the edge of the Han River, to feel small inside it. Instead, she walked through the front door, and Seo-jin grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the kitchen to show her where they kept the snacks. And the anxiety she had been carrying since she agreed to this arrangement quietly set itself down somewhere and waited to see if it was needed. The staff were formal with her at first, careful. They had worked in this house long enough to understand that people who arrived with the boss's son attached to their hand did not always stay. Amara didn't try to win anyone over. She went to work. Seo-jin's schedule was managed but not joyful. He had tutors and structured activities, and a routine that had been designed with great precision around every kind of development, except the kind that comes from someone simply sitting with you. She started sitting with him. She read to him in the evenings. She learned what he found funny. She noticed that he was scared of the dark but too proud to say so, so she started leaving a lamp on in his room without making it a conversation. She noticed that he chewed his thumbnail when he was anxious, and that he was anxious most often when his father was traveling and hadn't called. She didn't fix these things. She just noticed them and stayed nearby while he moved through them. Junhyuk watched. He was not a man who watched without purpose. In his world, observation was a tool. You watched to anticipate, to strategize, to stay ahead of what was coming. But watching Amara with his son was different. There was no strategy in it. He watched because he couldn't stop. 2 weeks in, he came home from a meeting at 1 in the morning to find the living room light on. He walked past the door and stopped. Amara was on the couch with Seo-jin asleep against her side, a book open in her lap. She had clearly fallen asleep herself, though she stirred when she heard his footstep. She looked up, found him standing in the doorway. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "He had a nightmare around 10, she said quietly. He didn't want to go back to his room. Junhyuk looked at his son's face, slack and completely relaxed, and felt something move in his chest that he had been carefully not feeling for 2 years. "Go to bed," he said. "I'll take him up." "He won't want to move." "He'll stay asleep, he always does." She looked at him. Something passed between them in the low light. Not heat, not yet, something earlier than that. Something like the first awareness that a person is real. She closed the book, stood, moved past him into the corridor. At the door she paused. "He asked me today why you don't eat dinner with him," she said. She wasn't accusing. Her voice was level. "I told him you were busy. He said he knows you're busy. He asked if you could be busy at the same table as him sometimes." She didn't wait for a response. She walked to her room and closed the door. Jun Hyuk stood in the doorway of the living room for a long time. Then he walked in, sat beside his son, and stayed there until morning. The threat came from outside. It always came from outside. A rival faction, the Jian network, had been testing the edges of Kang territory for months. Small provocations, delayed shipments, a message here, a missing contact there. Jun Hyuk had been managing it with the particular controlled patience of a man who preferred to let the enemy show their full hand before he played his. But then the intelligence came in. The Jian faction had identified a vulnerability, not in the business, not in the operations, in the boy. Someone in the house had been feeding information. Not much, just enough. Seo Jin's routine, his school schedule, his new caretaker's face and name. Jun Hyuk found out on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the source inside the house had been found and removed. By Thursday, Seo Jin's external schedule had been suspended. He told Amara on Thursday evening. She was in the kitchen with Seo Jin, helping him with a puzzle that had too many pieces for his age, but that he refused to accept was too hard. Jun Hyuk came in and stood at the edge of the room. He waited until Seo Jin had placed a piece, celebrated it sufficiently, and been distracted by the next section. Then he met Amara's eyes and tilted his head toward the corridor. She came out, he told her. She was very still while he explained. Her face didn't change. She didn't ask questions until he was finished. "How credible is the threat?" she asked. "Significant enough that I'm not taking chances." "What does significant mean? Are we talking surveillance or?" "It means I'm not taking chances," he said again. "A wall, but not unkind. More like the practiced economy of a man who has learned to measure what he says because some information is a burden." She looked at him for a moment. Then, "He'll notice if his routine changes without an explanation. He's perceptive. He'll be more frightened by the absence of information than by the information itself, if you tell it to him the right way." Jun Hyuk was quiet. "I'm telling you," she said, "not because I think you don't know your son, but because I spend 11 hours a day with him and you asked me to be honest with you." He held her gaze. "What would you tell him?" "That the world has some difficult people in it, and that his father is making sure they stay far away. That it's temporary. That the reason we're staying closer to home is because home is where he's safest, not because something is wrong with him or because he's being punished." Jun Hyuk absorbed this. "You've thought about it." "I started thinking about it the minute you walked into the kitchen with that expression on your face," she said. "I know what your worried face looks like. You think you hide it. You don't." "A beat." "No one has ever told me that before," he said. "I imagine not." The danger passed, not quickly and not cleanly. There were 3 weeks in which the compound was significantly locked down, during which Amara ran the equivalent of a small contained world for Seo Jin that involved enough activities, stories, indoor projects, and invented games to fill a curriculum. She slept less. She was more vigilant. She developed the habit of checking the corridor before she opened her door in the mornings, which she had not needed to do at her apartment in Maplegu. She did not regret staying. She examined this fact carefully because it surprised her. She had agreed to this position because the salary was real and the boy's face had made her say yes. She had expected the rest to be endurable. Instead, she had found something harder to name, a place where she was useful, a child who needed her specifically, not generically, not just any warm adult with nursing skills, but her, the way she moved and spoke and stayed. And a man who, behind every wall he had constructed between himself and the world, was paying attention in ways that nobody around him seemed to notice. She noticed the way he changed his schedule 3 days in a row to be home for dinner, after she relayed what Seo-jin had said. She noticed the way he started asking her questions at the end of long evenings, not about Seo-jin's health or logistics, but about her. What she thought, what she remembered about her own childhood, what she believed about people. She noticed that he listened with the same quality of attention that she used at work, complete, present, like nothing else was happening anywhere. And she noticed, one evening in the 4th week, when the lockdown was almost over and Seo-jin was in bed and the house was quiet, that she had stopped thinking of this as a temporary situation. That frightened her more than the threat had. "You're leaving," Jun Hyuk said. She was standing at the window in the study. She hadn't heard him come in. She turned. "I haven't said that." "You have the look of someone who is calculating an exit," he said. "I recognize it." She turned back to the window. Below, the river moved in the dark. "I'm not calculating an exit," she said quietly. "I'm trying to understand what I've walked into." "What have you walked into?" "I don't know yet," she paused. "That's the problem." He came to stand beside her, not close, with the careful distance of a man who has learned that proximity is a form of pressure, and who does not want to pressure her. "I don't know how to do this," he said. She glanced at him. "Do what?" "Whatever this is." He was looking at the window, not at her. "My wife died. I closed a door. I have been running an organization that requires me to be something that does not leave room for." He stopped. "For what?" she asked. He turned to look at her then, directly, the way he very rarely looked at anyone. "For wanting something I'm not sure I deserve." The house was quiet around them. Seo-jin was asleep 2 floors above. Somewhere outside, a boat was moving on the water. Amara held his gaze and felt, with the steady clarity that had always been her most reliable instrument, that this was a moment that had its own weight. "I think," she said carefully, "that the question of deserving is less important than the question of what you're willing to do with what you're given." He was quiet for a long time. "Stay," he said. It was not a command. It was the simplest version of a request that a man like him was capable of making. She looked at him, then she looked out at the river. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. And in the morning, when Seo-jin came down to the kitchen and found both his father and Amara already there, his father making coffee with the focused ineptitude of a man who had never learned to operate a coffee machine without supervision, and Amara gently taking it away from him and doing it properly. Jin climbed onto his breakfast stool and ate his rice and said nothing. But he was smiling. He was smiling the way children smile when the world has finally arranged itself, the way they have been quietly waiting for it to. If Amara and Seo-jin and Jun Hyuk moved something in you tonight, we want to hear it. Drop a comment below. Tell us who you were rooting for. Tell us what moment got you. Tell us if you want to know what comes next, because there is so much more of this story to tell. And if you are new to the Velvet Empire, do not leave without subscribing. There is a whole library of stories waiting for you here, every one of them built to make you feel something real. Watch one more tonight. Let yourself stay in this world a little longer. We make these stories because of you. We keep making them because of you. You are not just a viewer. You are part of this family. And somewhere in Seoul, a small boy named Seo-jin is still smiling. The next episode will show you exactly why that smile doesn't last forever.